On April 15, 1874, a Brooklyn heiress married into British power, and just 7 months later, on November 30th, Winston Churchill arrived, setting Victorian tongues on fire. Then came the headline-friendly myth, 200 lovers, a number so outrageous it sounded like a joke, yet it followed Jennie Jerome for the rest of her life like a shadow that also opened doors. How can a scandalous rumor become social currency in old money circles? And what happens when the story people buy is louder than the truth that built real influence?
In the late 19th century, old money wasn't just inherited wealth, it was a rule book written in accents, invitations, and silence. Britain's aristocracy had titles, estates, and prestige, but many families faced crushing costs to maintain them. America, meanwhile, produced new fortunes at industrial speed. When these worlds met, marriages often became transactions. An heiress's cash stabilized a noble house, while a noble name turned money into legitimacy. But legitimacy came with conditions, especially for women. A man could collect rumors and still be called a man of the world. A woman became a headline, then a cautionary tale. Newspapers and society columns, the Victorian ancestors of today's viral feeds, thrived on this imbalance. A whisper could become common knowledge by repetition alone, and the most profitable gossip was always the kind that threatened female respectability. That's why stories about Jennie Jerome were irresistible. She stood at the crossroads of money, beauty, and power, and her life unfolded in the same rooms where politics was quietly shaped: drawing rooms, country houses, royal-adjacent salons, and private dinners where influence moved without votes. Modern audiences recognize the machinery instantly. A rumor in 1890 travels like a screenshot in 2026. Detached from context, amplified by people who never met the subject, and hardened into identity through endless retelling. The logic is the same as influencer culture today. Attention becomes value, value becomes access, and access becomes real leverage. Yet old money added its own twist. The gatekeepers demanded women look flawless, while also punishing them for being visible. Jennie's era produced parallel case studies in the same moral laboratory. Anna Gould's fortune attracting a glamorous aristocrat who treated her wealth like fuel for spectacle. Gladys Deacon's beauty becoming both her passport and her trap. Arabella Huntington's climb proving that even brilliant strategy could still be met with social contempt. Jennie's story sits among them as a perfect contradiction, because the rumor that was meant to shame her also helped make her unforgettable. How did that contradiction become a system, not an accident? What happened next when a woman learned to weaponize the very attention designed to destroy her?
Jennie Jerome was born on January 9, 1854, in Brooklyn, into the kind of American prosperity that wanted more than comfort. It wanted recognition. Her father, Leonard Jerome, moved in circles where money and performance blended, earning a reputation that made society look twice. Her mother, Clara, carried the social instincts that turned wealth into entry. Jennie's education and travel exposed her early to Europe's language of status, where a title could outweigh a fortune in the public imagination. That early exposure matters because it teaches a quiet lesson. Power is not only what someone owns, it is who listens when someone speaks. In her teens and early 20s, Jennie became known for her striking presence and an energy that didn't fit the narrow Victorian ideal of a woman who should be ornamental and silent. That difference made her magnetic and dangerous in equal measure. In the old money ecosystem, beauty could be currency, but personality was risk. What happens to a young woman when she realizes the room responds more to her than she is supposed to allow? The foundational turning point arrived in 1873 when Jennie met Lord Randolph Churchill, the younger son of the Duke of Marlborough, at the Isle of Wight. The match looked like romance to some and calculation to others. Jennie brought American wealth and freshness. Randolph brought a name attached to Blenheim Palace and British political ambition. They married on April 15, 1874, and the next date became the fuse for a lifetime of myth-making. Winston Churchill was born on November 30, 1874, about 7 months after the wedding. Victorian society did not need proof to create certainty. It only needed a timeline and a hunger for moral theater. Was the birth actually early, or was the wedding timed late? Biographers have argued details and circumstances, but the public needed only the scandal-shaped version, an arithmetic that implied impropriety. And in old money culture, impropriety did not simply stain, it created fascination. That fascination was the seed of Jennie's soft power, the kind of influence built not through official authority, but through social networks, access, and the ability to host the right people in the right room at the right moment. Yet, soft power is rarely clean. It grows inside gossip, jealousy, and double standards. Jennie's marriage itself became a pressure chamber. Lord Randolph Churchill's political trajectory rose and faltered, and his health declined. The household carried stress that did not always stay private. Jennie moved through elite environments where women were expected to protect the facade of the men they married, even while being treated as disposable accessories. How does a woman remain irrelevant in a world that rewards her visibility but punishes her for using it? This is where the 200 lovers legend begins to make structural sense, not as a fact, but as a social mechanism. The specific number is so extreme it functions like a brand. It is memorable, repeatable, and impossible to disprove in casual conversation. It transforms a person into a story, and a story into a shortcut for judgment. But the same shortcut also signals something else to gatekeepers. This woman draws attention, and attention is useful. Jennie lived in a society where the Prince of Wales, future King Edward VII, and his set were associated with a glittering, rumor-rich world. Whether every whispered claim was true mattered less than the role rumor played. It placed Jennie in a narrative of proximity to power. In old money logic, proximity itself is leverage. A hostess who can gather politicians, aristocrats, artists, and financiers in one salon becomes an informal switchboard of influence. Jennie leaned into that role, not as a passive ornament, but as an active social strategist. She was not simply seen, she curated who saw whom. And she did it at a time when women could be barred from formal political authority, yet still shape outcomes through relationships and introductions. That is the paradox at the heart of her foundation. The very society that tried to police for reputation also created a marketplace where reputation, good or bad, could be converted into access. After Lord Randolph's death in 1895, Jennie did not fade into widowhood as the Victorian script preferred. Instead, she continued to move, to host, to connect, and to remain relevant in a changing world. Later marriages and relationships became part of the legend's fuel, especially when her choices challenged expectations about age, propriety, and acceptable female behavior. Were these decisions reckless, romantic, or rational in a system that offered women limited routes to agency? And if a rumor is powerful enough to become currency, who controls its exchange? The woman living inside it, or the society spending it? The breakdown of Jennie Jerome's story is not the collapse of a fortune or the fall of a title. It is the slow distortion of a human life into a public myth so loud it threatens to erase the person beneath it. Once the scandal narrative takes hold, it expands on its own. A single early birth timeline becomes a permanent insinuation. A few high-profile friendships become an imagined catalog. A woman known for charm becomes a woman reduced to temptation. The 200 lovers claim, repeated often enough, stops behaving like information and starts behaving like identity. Here is the cruel genius of old money gossip. It is designed to be unprovable and therefore immortal. If she denies it, denial becomes evidence of guilt. If she ignores it, silence becomes confirmation. How does anyone win against a story that profits from existing? The myth also thrives because it plays to the era's gender panic. Victorian society feared women who were socially competent and sexually autonomous, because autonomy threatened the entire exchange system: marriage as transaction, inheritance as control, lineage as legitimacy. So the rumor does moral work. It warns other women what happens if they appear too free, and it reassures men that female influence is always really about seduction. That's the hidden violence. It turns intelligence into flirtation, strategy into vice, and networking into scandal. Yet the same myth can also function as a key. In elite circles, being talked about can matter more than being approved of, because talk creates visibility, and visibility creates demand. People invite what excites a room even if they pretend to condemn it. Jennie's notoriety could make her a desirable guest and an effective hostess, precisely because she carried narrative electricity. Her salons and social gatherings became places where people wanted to be seen, where alliances could form under the cover of entertainment. Old money does not only trade in cash, it trades in social heat. But trading in heat burns the trader. The human cost is time, peace, and dignity, paid in small, repeated humiliations. Every new headline turns private grief into public property. Every rumor forces friends to choose between loyalty and self-protection. Every invitation comes with a silent condition: be dazzling, not complicated. And because the myth is salacious, it attracts those who come for the spectacle rather than the person. Even when Jennie's actual influence was political, cultural, and practical, the public filter kept pulling her back into the same shallow frame. What happened to the truth that she was more than a rumor? It was crowded out by the story that sold faster. The most dramatic example of this distortion is the mathematics of the legend itself. 200 lovers over 4 decades implies an almost industrial schedule, multiple affairs per year, sustained without pause, managed through logistics that would challenge even a disciplined administrator. The absurdity is the point. The number was never meant to be credible, it was meant to be unforgettable. And in the attention economy, unforgettable beats accurate. That is the breakdown. A life becomes content. Jennie's later years also carried the complications old money loves to dramatize: remarriage, age gaps, shock at inappropriate happiness, moral outrage used as entertainment. Instead of being allowed the dignity of ordinary choices, her decisions became symbols in other people's arguments about what women should be. Meanwhile, the deeper tragedy often gets missed. Jennie's real legacy was not the rumor, but her proximity to history through motherhood and network. Her role in creating an environment where Winston Churchill, for all his flaws and greatness, learned early that connection and conversation can be power. Yet even that legacy can be weaponized. The myth turns her into either the immoral mother or the glamorous muse, flattening a complex person into a label. In the end, the old money system succeeds if the audience remembers the headline but forgets the human. Jennie died in 1921 after an accident, and the myth continued without her, proving the coldest truth. Gossip outlives its subject because it was never really about her. It was about society entertaining itself while policing women at the same time. So what does this pattern look like today, when algorithms replace society editors and moral outrage is monetized by the click? Has anything really changed, except the speed of the rumor and the size of the crowd?
When Jennie Jerome is compared to other old money women, the 200 lovers legend stops looking like an isolated smear and starts looking like a standardized tool. Anna Gould's dowry was treated as her true face. Press jokes turned her into a wallet in a dress, while her husband's extravagance was romanticized as aristocratic flair. Gladys Deacon's beauty was treated like a public monument. When it changed, society recoiled and reclassified her pain as madness, then hid it behind institutional walls. Arabella Huntington's climb exposed another rule. Even when a woman converts wealth into lasting institutions, she may still be punished socially for not being born correct. These stories share one core engine. Women become conduits, of money into titles, of beauty into prestige, of scandal into headlines. And because conduits are valued only for what flows through them, the system feels entitled to discard them when the flow becomes inconvenient. The consequence is psychological and cultural. Old money teaches women to build identity out of performance, then punishes them when performance becomes unsustainable. Jennie's case is uniquely modern because it demonstrates how negative attention can be converted into real social leverage. That is the ancestor of today's viral paradox, where controversy drives visibility and visibility creates opportunity. But it also shows the price. The person becomes less real than the narrative. In modern terms, the legend functions like a brand keyword, short, shocking, and sticky. Once attached, it defines search results, conversations, and assumptions. In Victorian terms, it defined invitations, whispers, and reputational math. The broader social consequence is the normalization of double standards. Male infidelity becomes folklore. Female autonomy becomes indictment. Men are described as powerful, women are described as dangerous. Even in a class system that claims refinement, the entertainment value of shaming women becomes a shared hobby. And there is a political consequence too. When women's informal influence is constantly reframed as sexual rumor, it undermines recognition of the real mechanisms by which power operates: hosting, connecting, persuading, gathering information, shaping atmosphere. It becomes easier for a society to deny women's agency if it can reduce agency to seduction. Finally, there is a moral consequence for audiences. The myth trains viewers to prefer stories that are easy to repeat over truths that are complex to understand. It rewards certainty without evidence and punishes nuance as boring. This is why Jennie Jerome matters beyond her century. Her life reveals the timeless bargain offered to women in prestige cultures. Be fascinating, but accept that fascination will be used against you. So, when today's world turns private lives into public commodities, are we really watching something new or simply repeating the same Victorian machine with better lighting and faster distribution?
The most practical lesson from Jennie Jerome's story is that reputation is not merely personal, it is structural, shaped by incentives that reward distortion. If society profits from scandals, scandal will be manufactured. That means the first defense is autonomy, financial independence, legal clarity, and the ability to leave environments that monetize a person's vulnerability. Old money often trapped women through dependency and respectability, turning silence into a cage. The second lesson is narrative discipline. A rumor grows when it is allowed to become the only available story. Modern parallels are obvious. Without boundaries, platforms will reduce a life to a headline because headlines travel. The antidote is not constant rebuttal, but deliberate identity building, work, projects, alliances, and contributions that create competing narratives grounded in reality. The third lesson is ethical consumption. Audiences are not innocent bystanders, they are the market. If viewers click only the most extreme version, creators and publishers will keep serving extremes. Jennie's legacy suggests a sharper moral question. Why is a woman's alleged private life more interesting than the measurable ways she shaped rooms, networks, and outcomes? Finally, there is a cultural lesson about recognizing soft power as real power. Hosting, connecting, and influencing are not lesser forms of agency. They are often the hidden architecture of politics. Reducing women's influence to rumor is not just unfair, it is intellectually lazy, and it protects the system by keeping power invisible. The humane takeaway is simple. Prestige should never require self-erasure, and admiration should never become a license for cruelty. Jennie Jerome's story survives because it exposes a truth old money tries to hide. The most profitable myths are rarely the most accurate ones. The 200 Lovers legend endures not because it is well evidenced, but because it is easy. Easy to repeat, easy to judge, easy to consume. Yet the real Jennie, an American-born woman who learned to operate inside Britain's prestige machine, was far more instructive than any number. Her life shows how rumor can become currency, how attention can open doors, and how women can build influence even when formal power is denied. But it also shows the cost of living as a spectacle. The crowd will remember the headline long after it forgets the human.
Old money can preserve palaces, titles, and family crests, but it often preserves them by turning people into stories that can be traded without consent. If this documentary changed how you see scandal and power, subscribe for more old money cases where the truth is stranger and sadder than the myth. Share this video with someone who thinks gossip is harmless, and comment below, was Jennie Jerome a victim of a rumor economy or a strategist who understood exactly how to convert attention into influence? Between reputation and freedom, what would you protect first?